Is it a bird? Is it a Sundance? Is it Superman? Or is it a Spiderman? Neither! Swinging into today's guide, Mackay may have the worst voice lines, but one cannot deny the untapped potential of limitless movement. Jeez. 2022 is here, and so we're back with another guide to start the year strong. As we have 20 years to prepare, you may as well grab a drink or snack, maybe even a notepad if they still exist, and get yourself ready for the next installment of Battlefield 2042 guides.
I just dropped 2.
If you haven't tried Mackay, then picture yourself as Batman or even Spiderman in a full-blown conflict, running about with an M4, because that's basically how it feels.
Oh, that was pretty cool.
Grappling behind enemy lines, dealing swift justice to any poor soul who turns their back on you. So, let's get into it. Mackay's passive, Nimble, is like any other specialist. It sounds simple enough, and it is, but actually implementing it into your gameplay can be a little tricky when starting out. The first effect Nimble has is whilst aiming down sight, you will be able to stray faster in any direction so long as you ADS. I'll reiterate that this doesn't apply to hip fire, only ADS. This passive acts like Stalker Pro in Modern Warfare 3 or any game that has a perk which increases movement speed while aiming down sight. The first skill cap to this passive is readjusting to this new ADS strafe speed. Sometimes you may die as you don't expect to move so fast and so miss shots, which of course is infuriating. However, if you stick at it, you'll soon realise how much faster you move than your opponents, and so Mackay players should always look to strafe a lot while engaging targets. I tend to strafe left to right while adding in a few crouches and jumps where I can, as I'm still a noob on keyboard, but soon enough you'll be taking Mackay's strafe speed for granted until you change specialist, at which point you'll be able to relate to any superhero losing their powers and having to adjust to living life like everyone else. Just remember to always ADS for a speed boost unless hip firing makes more sense to you in that given situation. But that's only the first effect of Mackay's passive. His secondary passive effect allows Mackay users to ride ziplines at a much faster pace. While this is limited to only zipline uses, ziplines are often places you don't want to be and are usually very exposed positions to find yourself in. However, Mackay reduces this risk by shortening the time you are exposed. Similarly, by moving faster on ziplines, you gain more momentum, and so, when rushing enemies whilst on a zipline, you can and should add jumps to make it harder for enemies to shoot you mid-zip. This implementation of a jump can work to devastating effect when timed right before you get to the end of a zipline, as you will unexpectedly launch yourself several meters across whilst in mid-air, allowing you to get some cool trick shots if you're about that life. Otherwise, you could also combine their passive zipline momentum with their grapple gun to travel an even greater distance in one burst. Just remember that you can't shoot while grappling, which takes us to Mackay's tactical ability. Made infamous by Batman and then Pathfinder, making even the likes of Master Chief jealous enough to get his own. The grappling hook is one of the most iconic pieces of equipment ever to feature in media entertainment. Need to attack an objective without dying? Grapple to the roof and come in behind enemy defenders. Getting spawn killed too much? Grapple yourself out of that shitty spawn point. The grappling hook is truly one of the most fun pieces of kit you can take in Battlefield 2042, but unlike Boris's Sentry or Casper's C5 drone, it requires a lot more skill on the player's behalf and is only as effective as the player using it. My take on the grapple is that it is a relocation device, something like a teleport that allows you to almost instantaneously travel to any position you see within a 30-meter range. Continuing on, flanking is the bread and butter of using Mackay successfully, and to do so, I almost always run a suppressor to avoid appearing on my enemy's maps, as using him as a direct combatant will more than likely get you riddled full of bullets mid-grapple. Keep in mind, if you get shot while grappling, you can look around aggressively to adjust Mackay's flight path mid-grapple, making him a harder target to shoot out of the sky. But as an aggressive flanker, one should try to avoid being spotted while grappling, rather as Mackay isn't like Irish or Dozer, who have shields to sponge bullets. This means that in every life, you should always look to run around and flank the enemies, whether it's from the sides, below, or from above. The only way one can do this, however, is by analysing the environment and positions of your enemies to see how you can use the grapple creatively to catch enemies off by surprise. This makes Mackay more like an assassin or ninja than a superhero, but I digress. When flanking, you will always know when you are successful, as you most likely will be shooting an enemy in the back after a successful grapple flank. Furthermore, you will also know when you are extremely successful, as you will most likely be shooting multiple enemies in the back. Just be careful not to overextend or overexpose yourself in these scenarios, as your kill streak will be very short-lived. And when streaking, I highly recommend grappling when you can to other positions to keep the enemy constantly on their toes and avoid getting pinned down. It's also good to hit your shots when flanking, which can be harder due to Mackay's passive Nimble, which makes you ADS strafe a little faster. So sometimes it's best to stand completely still, get the kill, and then move on to your next target. Another benefit to using the grapple compared to other specialists is that even when you miss your grapple or only travel a short distance, Mackay will actually do you a solid and reload the grappling hook, allowing you to instantly use the grapple again, unlike other classes that have a cooldown even if you fat finger your ability. This isn't always a good thing, however, as this will sometimes get you killed, as usually after grappling, your gun will automatically be swapped to. But when this isn't the case and Mackay starts reloading the grapple hook, swap to your gun manually or find some cover fast, before an enemy or two blast you away while your grapple hook is still left in your hands. Another strategy for using Mackay successfully would be slingshotting, which, like Spiderman, is when you use your grapple to build momentum to launch yourself even further than usual at enemies, which can either go extremely well or, well, you know the rest. There are a range of methods to doing this successfully. One can either swap weapon mid-grapple to cancel it but maintain the same momentum and pull out your weapon earlier if required. Another method comes by attaching the grapple to the edge of an object or onto a very slim entity like a pole, so you can get pulled towards it but slide past where the grapple's attached, rather than hitting the object directly, cutting your momentum. The last method is through smoke grenades. If you didn't know, Mackay's grapple for some reason attaches to smoke, as though it's a solid object. This means that if you place your smoke in a position you like and grapple onto it, like our second method of slingshotting past an object, you will get pulled through the smoke, but as smoke is a gas, you will pass straight through it. The added benefit is that the smoke will hide your advance, allowing you to be much more aggressive and direct while not having to flank so much. Just remember, this means that if you are in smoke, you cannot grapple out of it, and most likely you will end up travelling a meter or two outside of the smoke before reloading your grapple hook, which can get you killed very easily. This makes for a good counter strategy, however, when playing against enemy Mackays. Just throw smoke at them, wait for them to pop out of the smoke with their grapple in their hands, and light them up. If you try shooting your grapple directly at enemies, it will actually hurt them, but I wouldn't recommend this, as the grapple deals 10 damage each time you hit the enemy, and so one would need to hit an enemy 10 times if they were at full HP without armor. It does make for some fun trolling moments, as most players ignore the damage as it is so little that you can keep annoying them with it so long as they don't see you. Smokes are best suited for Mackay, as stated earlier. They synergize and complement Mackay very well, while also being useful for covering any flanking maneuvers. They can help with a wide variety of combat scenarios, from revives to vehicle management. Just remember that as a Mackay, you are quite vulnerable while within smoke grenades, as you cannot grapple immediately out of it. EMP grenades work well with the flanking nature of Mackay, and one can combine EMP grenades with Mackay's grapple to quite literally rain death from above using C5. This strategy is usually almost always at your disposal, as Mackay players tend to play from high ground and so are out of sight for most vehicles.
Oh my god.
And like C5, frag grenades can be used from height to be thrown further distances. They can also be used to clear out machine gun nests like C5, albeit from further distances. C5 can be used for wall breaching, vehicle demolitions, and so much more. C5 is always a handy tool to have in your back pocket, though most gunfights do not require its usage, so consider first how might C5 have an impact in your gameplay before taking it along. One additional note I have for C5 while on Mackay specifically is with Mackay you can grapple up to high ground, and there are actually parts of buildings higher up that can be wall breached with a C5. This means that Mackay can grapple up, wall breach, a wall that is above the usual line of sight for ground foot soldiers, and he can shoot into enemies from above. This makes my 1000 IQ strategy for when playing as Mackay.
Is that the 1000 IQ strat?
Just because you don't reap as many benefits doesn't always mean you are providing less of them. In fact, insertion beacons are almost synonymous with Mackay, as they usually serve your team better, as only Mackay is able to get to certain parts of each map. And so, just like Uncle Ben says, with great power comes somewhat of a great responsibility to provide insertion beacons for the likes of Sundance players, so that they can wings you off height and get in those clutch plays, all thanks to your generosity. As Mackay tends to fight from longer ranges or survives longer due to be a flanking stealthy nature, he can benefit quite well from running ammo. However, in my opinion, this limits Mackay's combat options to just taking on enemy foot soldiers. This might be exactly what you're looking for, in which case ammo is definitely worth taking, and so go ahead. A feature I recently came across on the ammo crate is a circle that tells you how long you have until your next resupply is available. Just a little tip in case you never realised.
I've never noticed that. Wow.
Usually I would say only take a launcher if you're playing WoW, as he can hack and disable enemy vehicles to make easier to destroy. However, Mackay with this height advantage gives him a lot more survivability, especially against ground vehicles, and so taking anti-armor options, especially ranged ones, can severely impact the swing of a fight into your favour. CQC weapons are good for Mackays that like to storm buildings, but I highly recommend that you only use them to storm buildings, as their damage drop off at range is quite extreme and usually not worth attempting. The MP9 has come back into my good books, and like the K30, decimates enemies within range. Similarly, the MCS A80 shotgun is another CQC powerhouse, and with slug rounds can actually hit pretty far. So if you like sniping or trick shotting, the MCS might be the weapon for you. The AK for me is the best AR, as its high damage compensates for the suppressors I usually like to run on my primary weapon. Its tap fire is also surprisingly lethal at range, making this gun effective at most ranges and thus a very versatile and complementary weapon platform for Mackay users. The M5A3 is also a top tier weapon and has a high RPM for close quarter fighting. However, it isn't so effective as the AK's tap fire for further ranges, especially with a suppressor. Going back to Mackay's passive Nimble, this increases LMG's strafe speed, making them feel a lot lighter and more akin to traditional ARs. Your grapple also negates a lot of the travelling you'd otherwise be doing at a slower pace with LMGs. For these reasons, LMGs are good with Mackay, as when behind a horde of enemies, you're usually wanting a gun with the largest ammo capacity, and only LMGs can provide 200 rounds per clip. The bulk of my time on Mackay has seen me favour the AK, and during this time, my preferred loadouts include a C5 and smoke combination for general gameplay, while the M5 launcher combined with EMP grenades has genuinely shocked me and constantly seen his game time. The reason the M5 launcher has become my preferred choice is because of the increased range that one can take our vehicles with, which when paired with the likes of Mackay's grapple hook plus EMP grenades, players can devastate enemy armor with this strategy, while the M5 can also be used to wall breach just like C5. Yeah, look at that, get fucked. When it comes to close quarter fighting, the usual weapons I tend to run include the MCS A80 shotgun and the MP9. With the MCS, I tend to run C4 and smokes, as I don't really need ammo. C4 can be used to breach and destroy vehicles at close ranges, while smokes can help me cover my advances, which with the shotgun's limited range is very much needed, as well as being able to approach vehicles a lot safer. But with an MP9, I run a drum mag, so an ammo crate is always needed, as the MP9 tends to burn through ammo very quickly. When it comes to grenades, I'll tend to use whatever the situation requires, usually a smoke, sometimes an EMP. With the PKP, it's the same as the AK-27. I use the M5 plus an EMP grenade, as the PKP deals with plenty of foot soldiers already, so EMPs and M5s ensure that no vehicles will want to engage you. I always use snipers with an insertion beacon, but ammo as well as a SOFLAM can be useful, as you may be sniping for a while, or your team might need a bit of assistance dealing with enemy armor. I use smokes usually to allow me to escape pursuing enemies when found, but proximity grenades also work well in keeping you informed of any encroaching aggressors. Due to the nature of Mackay's playstyle of always looking to play the high ground, Mackay usually has good sightlines of the entire battlefield, and when paired with a sniper, He can decimate targets from positions that would take other specialists a lot longer to get to. Plus, he can always jump off and grapple from building to building if he ever starts to get pinned down. Mackay's playstyle when I use him is that of a Black Ops Spiderman, in the sense that he should never be seen while traversing around parts of the map that are only accessible to him, and should only engage in gunfights when he has to, taking advantage of his increased ADS strafe speed to win direct 1v1s, while using his grapple to quickly relocate himself into an advantageous position to drop enemies from places where and when they least expect it. Mackay's biggest niche comes with his ability to access a variety of locations, which in turn means he can use this environmental advantage to make use of his equipment differently to other specialists. And so, I like to try and keep this in mind before I use my equipment to much less effect. On attack, an ideal Mackay player will use their grapple to approach objectives from angles that are inaccessible to other specialists, thus increasing the odds that not only will they survive getting to the objective and PTFOing, but should also pick up a few kills on unsuspecting foes while doing so. Even better if they can get a spawn beacon down or use their height to take out a defending vehicle with explosives or well placed shots through windows on drivers and gunners. ARs, SMGs and shotties work best from my experience for attacking. Defending isn't Mackay's forte, and when a Mackay finds himself doing so, he should leave the bulk of defending to specialists like Boris and Irish to bolster objectives, while medics and recon classes support these entrenched positions. Mackay and Sundance players on the other hand should be focusing on slowing down the enemy attacks before they get to these defences, whether this is by flanking players directly, making them restart the long trek from their spawn to your objective, or by destroying vehicles before they get too close. Mackay should always be on the move, making it hard for players to pin them down in one location while keeping their whereabouts hidden, allowing them to devastate armoured targets when required to do so.
Oh my god. Just slingshot myself up.
Snipers and LMGs work very well with Mackay on defense, as you can pop shots and hold unexpected positions from incredible ranges. Just remember about what I said about constantly moving and avoiding getting pinned down in one spot. Though Mackay is quite simple, and so I believe specialists like Boris and Casper provide more variety with their playstyles and equipment, no one else can do what Mackay does, including Sundance, and for that reason, I doubt anyone has or will underestimate Mackay's potential on the battlefield, and I doubt anyone, including myself, will after this guide.
Oh my, that guy just got outflanked so hard.
While unusual for specialists or even legends from Apex, Sundance is mostly known for her legendary passive ability, the wingsuit, which, as Shroud has shown us, can be incredibly powerful ability in direct attacking, rotating, avoiding bad spawns, and flanking enemies with. The trade-off is that you need to have high ground to provoke this ability, which can take some time to get to. Her tactical is incredibly diverse, allowing her special grenade types such as scatter grenades, or otherwise known as cluster bombs, which I'm sure you've all died to at least once. Her anti-armor grenades not only allow her to tackle ground armor, but also air vehicles, which again is rare when it comes to specialist abilities, as only Sundance and Rao can target air vehicles directly with their abilities. I genuinely appreciate you getting this far into the video, and if you're expecting more, I do apologise, but this is the end of the guide. If there was something you thought I missed out on or haven't covered, be selfless and share your ideas down in the comments for everyone else to learn from. Thank you guys once again for giving me your time of day, and I hope you learned something new or at least enjoyed seeing this specialist from a new perspective. Next episode we'll be looking at Dozer and how one can make the most of his abilities. This has been Squeaky27 on Battlefield 2042. Have a great 2022, and I'll catch you all in the next video.
Whoa, you almost got run over.
I just saw that. Oh shit.
Whoa! I did a barrel roll!
Bro, I just did 2 barrel rolls and landed on my wheels.
Why was I not recording before? Look, my hands, no hands. No hands! Look at this! What the hell? It's like magnetic, bruv. It's actually...